Hey, I'm going to be talking about money. How many people here like money? Yay! But specifically, I'm going to be talking about fast money. When I found out I was going to be speaking on the fast money stage, I just basically have just been walking around the office being like, fast money! That's what I just keep saying. So, to talk about fast money, let's talk about some fast money experiences. I'm going to be specifically talking about e-commerce. Anyone here work or use e-commerce? Okay, good. How many people are involved with e-commerce, like as a job? Oh, good. This is a great audience for this talk. I guess that's why it's called the fast money stage. But let's look at a modern e-commerce experience here. There's really like 4 parts of modern e-commerce as I like to look at it. And the first one is shopping carts. We all have shopping carts on our sites. This is great. This is a shopping cart. The second one, we have a catalog. You know that catalog page, right? Here's the catalog. Product pages. I'm American, so I picked some American product pages here. Baseball and guns. We have the checkout, that order form. This is a Sears Roebuck order form. Now, if you notice, this is actually the same layout that probably many of you have for your checkout pages. The thing that's really fucked up about this is that e-commerce is really anachronistic. All of the things we use, all the interfaces we use are from 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And somehow we thought, oh, let's just put them online and it'll work really well. But the thing about it is it's actually slow. This is not fast money at all. This is really slow money, and that kind of sucks. So how do we make this faster? How did we get there? Well, we got there because when we started in e-commerce, how many of you have been in e-commerce for a long time? Okay, like the 90s? Okay, there's a couple people in the back from the 90s. That's good. I love the 90s. The 90s was a terrible place. But we were really scared about e-commerce. At this point, commerce was really scary, right? We had no idea what we were doing. We had a lot of fear. We had this fear of the unknown. Well, can we take credit cards online? Can we do this? We had this fear of fraud. What if we put the credit cards online? I remember when I was at Threadless, the first Threadless database that stored credit cards was Access. You could probably download it. It's probably called creditcards.whatever.db or something on the root of the web server. So I mean, credit cards, we were scared of all these things. And we had a fear of trust. How do we make sure that the users trust us? And really, I think it was a fear of customers. We were scared of what happens when we got successful. And so after thinking about this for a long time, I realized that e-commerce is largely based entirely on fear. And so I read this book, actually. This book is called Business at the Speed of Stupid. It's basically it's case studies on 90s e-commerce. I guess I'm kind of a nerd when that's my favorite book, or one of them. But the thing about this book is it just talks about how, e-commerce is hard. Specifically, it talks about how these companies would say, I have an e-commerce product, we're going to launch it, or we're going to re-platform, and it's going to cost $5 million. This is the 90s when things cost $5 million. And then they go through the product, and then $100 million later, the company would close because they couldn't afford to re-platform their e-commerce platform. Like, it's insane. But luckily, that was 15 years ago. A lot has changed. But the interface hasn't. We still have that same interface. But commerce itself doesn't have to be hard. So one thing about this is all of our experiences around commerce have changed, from Uber to Airbnb with this kind of one-click stuff. And so let's talk about these experiences. I recently was at an e-commerce roundtable, which I guess makes me the e-commerce King Arthur. But there was a lot of experiences that we talked about, so many experiences, so I decided to count them. We have a payment experience, persistent experience, I don't know what that means. Ubiquitous experience, I don't even know what that means either. A lot of these things, I don't know what any of these things mean. Customer experience, I actually know a lot about, but my favorite one that we talked about is user experience. This is, I think, the most important thing, the most important topic that we don't talk about. Because the customer is the user, and we often forget that the customer is the user. We're often thinking about, this customer is just this number, this conversion, or this conversion rate or whatever. But so thinking about this for the last couple years, we set out to do this experiment. We decided, what happens if you focus on the user? And that's pretty simple. What happens if you focus on the user in your commerce experience? And so this has actually created this company called Modest, which PayPal bought, and then we created this thing called PayPal Commerce. And when you focus on the user, we had this very small goal, which was just how do we fix e-commerce? And I vacillate between saying commerce and e-commerce because e-commerce is the past. And I think it's time to drop out that E. And so that's the first thing. But the reason that we needed to fix it is because the retail landscape is changed. It's moved. All of our users are consumers. They're all mobile, right? Checkout is a pain in the ass. Consumers, they're totally distracted. Like, how many people do anything on their phone besides buy stuff? Like all of us, we're always looking at Pinterest, we're looking at Twitter, I'm addicted to Twitter. And so conversion turns out to be really, really hard, and for lots of reasons, because it's actually very complicated, and it takes way too long in security checks. I don't really know what excessive payment security checks are, but it's probably that page after you've entered all of your information, which I'll talk about. But it's all just friction. And so here's an example of a customer experience. They have to find a product, they have to add it to a cart, they have to check out, they have to enter their payment information, they have to enter their shipping information, maybe enter the shipping information again. I don't know why. Why do you do that? Like, I've entered my address like 4 times sometimes to buy something. And then you have to double check everything is correct. This is that page, my favorite page in the world, where it has all of your information, and it's just like, after showing that you've wanted to buy this about 50 times, can you just confirm that you might want to purchase this? And you're just like, yes, I want to purchase this for the 30th time. And so this is the thing. This is really hard. But they bought it, right? But actually, no, that's not cool. We want them to be much quicker. We don't want them to have to find all that stuff, build the cart, all that stuff. We don't want to build it for them. We want to put it in front of them and then just have them click buy, right? Tap buy. That's the important thing. And that's basically much faster than the past. So that's basically the idea behind PayPal Commerce, but the thing is, we didn't remove any features, we don't have a cart, we don't have all this fun stuff, all those features from the past, because they're all friction. And so what we did, though, is we really thought about user experience. And so I wanted to tell you a bit about that stuff, because I really just want to tee up these ideas of how we built a user experience in commerce and what are the rules that we have for user experience. Because the thing about commerce is we think of it just as this simple idea of buying, when really this is a product that people love. And so if we don't treat it the same way as we treat our social apps, all the rest of our apps, and we don't think about the user first, then we'll never get there. So let's talk about user experience real quick. And the one thing, your mileage may vary on this stuff. It works super well for me, but whatever. The first one that I like to talk about here is fast, speed. I want things to go very, very fast, but I'm not talking about latency. How many people like latency? Slow, like let's make the service super fast. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about allowing the consumer to get what they want faster. And this is a different thing than latency, because this is more about just following intent. If I had my druthers and I was living in the future, I would just look at Amazon and a drone would arrive with whatever I thought about ordering. Because it's all about doing, like saying, I want that thing, and then clicking it and having it arrive, instead of going like, I want that thing, and then I'll go through this huge process to get it. So it leads right into simplicity. Simplicity is something that I also think is one of the most important things about commerce experiences. But the problem with simplicity is it's really hard. One of my favorite, I read this article recently about the iPhone camera, which is a great camera, and everyone's like, oh, it's a camera, but then I think there's 1,000 people that work on the iPhone camera. And that's a simple experience. And so when you think about simplicity, simplicity is actually really complex, but I have a simple rule, and the simple rule is don't be clever. That's it. How many people here are excited about being clever? Okay, there's a couple people that raise their hands. They're going to die before the rest of us because they're clever. So just remember that. But another rule, like when people say, well, what does that mean to be clever? Like, don't be clever. What does that mean? In the US, taxes were in April, taxes were due. And I always say, here's the easy rule about clever. If your tax accountant says, I have a very clever idea for you, you run away. But then for some reason, within technology, within startups, within our interfaces, we're like, oh, clever is awesome because it feels good inside. But it really is terrible for the users. So here's how you don't be clever. Just invest in user experience. That's it. That's how you don't be clever. Just spend money on thinking about the user within your commerce experiences. And user experience really is the key, because it's the difference between functional and usable. And how many people here are developers? Developers, how many people, keep your hands up, developers. Okay, how many people are the developers, the 4 of them in the room, how many of you have talked to users recently? Okay, so this is some weird fantasy developers here. Because here's the thing, developers never talk to users. We're the worst at it. All we do is we're just like, no, it works, test pass, then we go home. And then like the salespeople are like, what the fuck is this? This is terrible. We need to really think about user experience, and the customer will end up thanking you. And personal is something good. We've been talking about personalization in e-commerce for, as far as I can tell, since the 90s. I remember all those really bizarre meetings with these huge enterprise companies talking about personalization. And it's funny because these were these huge solutions that were then just surpassed by adding JavaScript to your website and just doing collaborative filtering for like $30 a month. Well, the thing is all that stuff sucks, because what it does is it actually creates more noise. And so what I like to think about is, how do you decrease that signal-to-noise ratio? And we do it this way, by just saying, okay, how do we give the customer the finer things they care about? not the things I care about them caring about. And that's a tricky thing, but we can do it. You can do it slightly differently, and this is one of the things we did at Modest and we do at PayPal Commerce, is we use a lot of design, a lot of coach marks on all sorts of things to help train the users to fall in the funnel that we want them in, instead of actually forcing, or instead of them saying, oh no, I want this, and us saying, no, that's not what I want you to want. Like this is this weird world in e-commerce. We're trying to force them to buy what you want them to want, and that's not how consumers are. They have a very specific need. Remember that follow intent. The next one is delightful. I always put this in a presentation because when you read Hacker News every once in a while, they're like, this is a delightful app. And I don't know if anyone ever knows what that means. So I always put this here because I have no idea what it means. But let's talk about it for a second. I actually think we can talk about delightfulness within our interfaces, within our user experiences, within our commerce experiences as serendipity. And what I mean by that is, and I think you have to enhance serendipity. What I mean by that is, oh, I forgot I have this equation. Have you guys seen this equation? This is like a really strange equation you'd see in like some dentist office. It's like luck, when preparation meets opportunity. But that is actually how you enhance serendipity, because if you replace luck with serendipity, and then you create the opportunity for the customer. This is my example of serendipity. So I bought these glasses, which are really cool glasses, and I really like them, on an app called Operator. Has anyone here used Operator? It's a great app, simple app, but all you do is you just type in there and you're just like, yo, I'm looking for some cool glasses, and they're like, how about these? And you're like, holy shit, yes. Like that surprise is what I'm talking about. Because oftentimes when you're looking at, you have this, analysis paralysis, where you have 1,000 images and you're like, oh yeah, which one will I get? Well, Operator, all they did is they have a huge, they look at who I am, I don't know, probably Google searching me, like the image search, and they're like, this dude would love weird glasses, or whatever. But whatever it is, they created this opportunity where I was just like, holy shit, this is a surprise. That serendipity there is what I'm talking about. But the thing they also did is they had a huge e-commerce experience that was very delightful. And it worked out very well. But finally, and this is my final important point, and this is the most important, repetition. How many people here deal in innovation? Okay, I'm sorry for the next couple slides. How many people love Kanye West? So Kanye West does he does a lot of interviews on the internet, and sometimes he says really crazy things, and I like to read them because sometimes he says crazy things, but most of the time he says really smart things. And this Kanye West interview a while back said, innovation gets almost too much credit. And I was like, Kanye, what? What do you mean? And he goes on and he says, there's no money in innovation. And I was just like, okay, this is very interesting, because I always thought Kanye was this very innovative type of fellow, like he's doing really interesting things. And then he goes on and says, the money is in repetition. And this really resonated with me, because there's this thing that happens, especially in big companies, where we think that innovation is the reason that we're doing things, that innovation is what we're actually focusing on. But innovation doesn't matter at all. In fact, innovation is the last thing that you want to do, because the customer does not care about innovation. They're not there for innovation. They're there for something that works over and over again, that is consistent. They care about repetition. And when we're thinking about innovation, innovation does not exist without repetition. And when you have repetition, that's when you have a product that works. And so the only thing that matters here is repetition matters. And so this is how we survive with products. User experience, invest in that, invest in simplicity, and then test it, repeat those tests, and then weaponize your products, and everything will be great. That's it. I'm done. Thanks.
Ask you some questions?
Yeah, questions.
Yeah, okay. Sure. You went at fast speed, so I think you did well. Could everyone follow here? Right? I think also at the back, maybe people should put on earphones if it's bad to hear, basically. And we got quite some spaces here at the front. I'm actually very curious, basically. I mean, you see all these, basically all these different opinions on innovation, right? As you were sharing just now. I mean, basically.
That wasn't an opinion. That was fact.
Very good. Great, I'm being corrected. I mean, so basically what you actually want to help people out. So basically a lot of these people here are trying to be innovators, right? What kind of suggestion or advice would you give them to actually make it work?
Well, I mean, what I just said was just repeat. And what I mean by that, and I think this is a really important point, because we often focus on innovation as like the thing that we're doing. Like people say, I want to make a very innovative product. But what actually is important, what the most important thing is making sure that it's used over and over and over and over again. There were a lot of really innovative car sharing apps before Uber. Can anyone name them? No, because they all lost. They sucked. They didn't work. Uber was the winner because of repetition. It doesn't matter how innovative the previous one was. It could have been in spaceships. Nobody knows. But the only winner is the one that is able to repeat, to do that over and over again. And when you think of e-commerce, this is one of the most important things, is how do you give that experience over and over and over and over again. PayPal Commerce is a really great product and it works very well. If we don't figure out how to get it to be ubiquitous amongst all of y'all, it's not going to work. And that's the thing, that's the exciting thing I think about PayPal as a whole, is it is ubiquitous. They've figured out repetition. I'm sure there are better innovative examples of payments. You know, maybe like we saw Shingy's talk yesterday, they had payments in the suit cuffs. That's really cool, but it's like, that's innovative. How do we make sure the repetition is what we focus on? And apparently there are a bunch of children here. Should we take some questions from the audience?
No, definitely. I bet there are.
Any questions from anyone? In my...
Have you been paying attention? Yeah? Anyone?
It's fine if there's no questions.
I have one another for you. So maybe just another question for you, and so the audience can think about it a little bit more. So basically you're saying, right, you should really reach out and make sure that people start using your product. And I think in general what you see in the financial space is that really it's really about partnerships. So how do you deal about that with Braintree?
Well, I actually don't think that, I think partnerships are great. I don't think it's more about marketing. I think it's just about making sure that you're optimizing for repeat use. That making sure that you're optimizing to whatever, and this is like a Malcolm X situation, like by any means necessary. Like you just need to do whatever you need to do to get it done. If that's partnerships, great. If it's marketing, great. If it's literally knocking on doors, like we did in the Obama campaign, that's great too. You just have to get it done. And that's something that I think people forget about, is you have to use every single task. You have to do everything. You can't just say, okay, we're just focusing on partnerships. Big companies often do partnerships because it's easy and it's nice and we have big company friends and we're able to work together as this weird big company group. But the thing is all of the grassroots stuff that you can do, all of the kind of fun marketing stuff that you can do, that's what's really important. And I think that's why oftentimes big companies are looking to startupize their culture, is because the startups, there's this idea that you do everything. And the big company wants to do everything, but for some reason we forget. But I think there's a couple good examples of people doing it, so it seems to work.
Okay, cool. Good to hear. Yes, we got some questions. Scream it loud, I'll repeat them.
Because, with the current, let's say it's an articles, pages which are going, on Google, Facebook, people are not going to go directly to the websites anymore. So how we can, for example, collect payments inside the business.
Two questions. One was, how does Braintree compete with all these other competitors, or Braintree PayPal? And the second is the world without Amazon, which I don't think is a real world, but we'll act like it is. The first question is, how do we compete? I think the first thing that we compete is that we're much bigger and we're really good. And so I think if we just continue to be really good, we'll continue to be much bigger, and then it'll be a kind of an easy competition. If we stop being good, then we have a problem. But luckily, PayPal's doing really well, and I'm pretty happy with it. And I mean, we have a couple PayPal people here in the audience. Raise your hands. They're good. These are great people, but the thing is they're very excited about PayPal, and that's one of the reasons that when we chose to sell a company to PayPal, it's like, what other finance company that has 184 million active users, right? Like, what other company also has 14 million businesses that use it, merchants? And so it's like, okay, this is exactly why we wanted to hook our cart up to that horse, because if we're talking, the only time commerce is fun is with scale. Like, the saddest thing in the world is when you start an e-commerce company and you're waiting for a sale. And you're just sitting there and you're just wishing someone besides your mother would buy something, which is how it always is for me. I'm like, thanks, Mom, for buying something again. I'll return your money. But so I think that's why we said, okay, PayPal's great, because PayPal has these numbers there that are just bananas. And when you attach those bananas numbers to an opportunity, you're just like, fuck yeah, let's do this, which is great. The second one was more about, as we all start living in these kind of walled gardens of Google, of Facebook, etc. How does independent websites, and I love that your independent website example was Amazon. How does your independent websites like Amazon compete? Well, actually that's a great question, and I think when you think about commerce. I think commerce is starting to blend and bleed into all of these different places. And so whether it's buy buttons that are being surfaced in Pinterest with buyable pins, or whether it's conversational commerce in kind of like we did a really cool thing with Uber and Facebook Messenger, where you can order an Uber inside Facebook Messenger. That was a neat thing. So it's like this stuff is happening. And I think one of the things that was really important to us at PayPal is making sure that it's accessible. Because we all can't be Uber and Facebook. But we can integrate with them, PayPal can, and then y'all can integrate with us, and then we can have this nice little conduit. And so that's, I think, what the future looks like, is it looks like about accessibility. And this is one of the things that I'm really excited about. Dan, our CEO, talks about a lot, which is how do we democratize access to this big company stuff? Because as retailers, oftentimes we have the least amount of money earmarked for technology. And this is the sad world where I may be really great at selling shoes or apparel, but I'm really bad at iOS programming, which is probably fine. So how do we become really good at iOS programming and let them sell the apparel, and then we just connect together? That's kind of what we do, and that's what we try to do here at PayPal. So I hope that answers your question.
Great. We got another one.
In the back.
Scream loud. Come closer, come closer.
This dude has headphones on. He's listening to me talk in the headphones. Okay.
Exactly.
When will Braintree include Bitcoin payments?
Braintree does include Bitcoin payments. When are you going to read the internet? Now, we've had Bitcoin payments for a long time, actually, and it's pretty awesome. I'm a huge Bitcoin fan. If I could buy something other than drugs, I think it'd probably be better. But yeah, you can use Bitcoin on Braintree quite a bit, and we've seen a lot of really neat integrations with it. I, in fact, bought my camera with Bitcoins, so you can actually buy physical goods and not drugs. It's the only thing you can buy is cameras, though. Great. You're welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
What makes CTO great?
Oh, what makes a CTO great? I think that's another session. And how much time do we have? Probably empathy. It's probably the number one thing that makes a CTO great. Empathy and not only hiring white dudes. If you could do those two things, you'd be pretty solid as a CTO. But you know, most CTOs don't do that, so then you'd also stand out as a good CTO too, and then you'd suddenly have really great people that work for you because suddenly they'd be like, wow, this person is not the typical CTO. So I think that's the number one thing, but I could be wrong, but I'm not.
Two questions. What do you do to remain good? Because you thought we are good and we will remain good. And the second thing is, what's next?
So the two questions were, what do you do to remain good?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question that I don't know how to answer. And the second one is, what's next? How do you remain good? Well, I'm a programmer, and so how I remain good at programming is I just program every day. I recently started taking photos, and how I try to be better at photography is just to take photos every day. So I think it's just practice. I think that's the only thing you have to do to remain good. And so you just have to practice everything. The second one is, what's next? I don't know. What's next? Don't we have an... Yeah, you know, I think what's next is... Actually, I have no idea what's next. I'm just waiting. I've been waiting for years for what's next.